This podcast, Strange, Rare, and Peculiar, is for kind of those in the know about homeopathy, deepening your knowledge, bringing you more information about what you need to know and maybe what you can leave aside about homeopathy.
Homeo what?
Homeo what?
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Here we go.
It is podcast time, and I feel like it has been forever since we were on this particular horse.
Yeah, we recorded our last podcast at the beginning of the holiday break. It was like December... it was on the solstice. It was December 21st.
Really?
Wasn't it? I believe it was.
I remember.
Is that true?
Anywho,
so. We're back. Here we are. Back on the weekly recording.
Do you know I watched a podcast yesterday?
Yeah.
Yeah, not one of ours. Of this riotous rugby podcast, and the swearing. Oh my goodness!
I wondered what you were watching because I heard the language.
It's filthy. Can we spice ours up with a little bit of, I don't know,
naughtiness? Homeopathy after dark.
Well, I mean, this one happily is not involving the video, but I think we should really sort that out.
I think we will sort that out.
All right, good. All right.
Especially since you have lipstick on.
Stop it. I knew that was coming. That's not true. It's also not true, folks.
So today we're going to talk about research. And, gosh, it's a huge topic for us to cover, but let's just kick on with sort of how we've approached our place in the evolving research paradigm in homeopathy. And I think as we sort of set the stage for what we're going to talk about for the next, I don't know, half hour or so, however long it takes, is sort of the different... Why are you cracking up?
Because it could be 10 minutes, but it could be an hour and 10 minutes. We have no idea.
Right.
So if you're driving in your car, I don't know.
Keep going.
Move forward.
So
don't forget to indicate.
It's kind of a funny place because there are a number of opportunities in research, and homeopathy is sort of underrepresented in the larger research paradigm. Would you agree?
Oh my God, absolutely.
And
lack of, for a bunch of reasons.
Yeah, and there are, and we come at it, both of us, as researchers, and I mean, I think I mentioned this on a previous podcast. I actually never thought I would be a practitioner. I was interested only in the research aspect.
Which would have been such a shame because you're so good with people and you're such a good prescriber. Think about it. That would have been a narrow approach, and lots of students and lots of clients would not have benefited from what happened.
Oh, you're so nice. But it does speak to one point, which is something you brought up. So actually, for context, we did a talk similar to some of the things we're going to talk about today, just 2 days ago on, Tuesday night, and it was for the Homeopathic Nurses Association. Mm-hmm. And it was a great opportunity to speak to medical professionals about how they can participate in research, and we introduced to them our PGRN, which is a practitioner-generated research network idea.
But the first thing you just said there is really important. Hang on, you want to keep going, don't you?
Well, I just want to put it into the context because it was that you brought up one of the slides that you presented was that a challenge in homeopathy is that we tend to work in our silos, and part of that is because the type of people who are predisposed to becoming homeopaths are often introverted people who sort of work in their own little cubby.
I think similar to therapists and counselors and folks that are in the helping professions.
Yeah.
We're actually, even though, we're able to socialize and all the rest of it, most of us are
we're just
somewhat introverted.
Weird.
Yeah. Well, and I think, put it a different way rather than labeling it. Like, reflective time is valued highly. With folks in our profession.
Yeah. And also we work a little outside the mainstream, which then means when you're swimming upstream, it takes a little bit more energy.
Oh my God. Barging your way through all of those other fishes to complete your analogy.
If the video idea is right, because then they could see the gestures that you're making, which include you as a fish.
I used to have a T-shirt from when I was putting I think it might have been before homeopathy, so I'm in my 20s, early 20s.
During the era of your diaper pants?
It might have been. And but I was working in a beer distributor.
Ah.
And I got this T-shirt that I loved.
Was it purple?
No, it was white. But it had a picture of one fish swimming upstream against a million other fishes.
Really?
Yeah, and it was an advertisement for Red Stripe beer, which I think is Caribbean beer.
Yeah, you can get that here in the States.
Right. But I love that T-shirt, and there's always a part. Just to reiterate the point, there's a. You didn't know that, did you?
About your T-shirt?
No.
No, I haven't seen that T-shirt, but I think it's interesting.
Oh, I don't have it anymore.
No, but you do have other things from that era, which perhaps you shouldn't. Anyway, but I digress. But I do find it interesting that you may have seen yourself as that fish swimming upstream.
Well, if historically, I was really struggling in my early 20s because I studied so hard and got a kick-ass degree, and I was unemployable.
Weird, right?
Yeah, you go from first-class honours degree to selling beer. Or no, not even selling it, shifting it.
Yeah.
Moving it. Not even that well.
Yeah. Which, we've talked about that in a previous podcast.
All right.
We have to go down that road again.
But, people don't... It's like...
Here we go again. Here goes hell.
It's 1989.
All
it's
over
cold
again.
in Dunedin.
Oh, my gosh.
But one of the things you said, which is certainly relevant, is, and in keeping with that sort of reflective nature that we tend to have, is that homeopaths, clinicians, are natural researchers.
Totally.
We actually use research skills, even though sometimes they're unformed and a bit, not sharp, but we use research skills every day in our practices.
Totally.
Yeah, and I think as a profession, we're much more attuned that way than others,
I haven't thought about this. It's funny, this podcast is now taking a slightly different direction than what we had planned, but that's okay. Once we go to the 80s, right? Then, no, but what you're talking about is interesting because you're saying how homeopaths are natural researchers, and it's true because we are working with old materials, so we're having to contextualize things from another century or 2 centuries into contemporary pathological language, right, which requires not just sort of research skills, in other words, how to find the information, which is daunting in the beginning because of the tools we use, but also there's a like a translation that has to happen, and that translation, it's interesting. It really came clear for me in the study of the history of medicine because, there was a course I had to take that we call the Disease of the Week course, which every year you sort of do a historical deep dive into different pathologies and they're the sort of historical evolution of them. And I'm like, well, we identify with the old one, like we talked about chlorosis, green sickness.
Oh, yeah.
And, and I'm sitting there thinking, well, gosh, I've used that rubric. Because we still sort of qualify pathology based on the way that it would have been seen and diagnosed in the mostly in the 19th century. Would you agree? Do you think?
Yeah, we do. I mean, it's what we do is kind of scarily Victorian. At best Edwardian.
So that means that the skills that are unconsciously cultivated in homeopaths are basically research skills, aren't they?
They are. We you see a remedy in a repetrization, you're not really sure about it, boom, off you go.
Yeah.
You go hunting for it. What's that about? And there's a method, and so research is about, it's about being inquisitive,
right?
But it's also about a method by which you're going to go about answering your question. And I think we, for the most part, develop pretty good methods of doing that, although I notice some of our students are clearly using Dr. Google for for a whole lot of
I can't believe when that happens.
question answering.
In homeopathy, I mean, it's one thing if it's about pathology and so forth.
Naughty students.
But yeah, in homeopathy, when there are... Well, anyway, let's not go there because I'll get all worked up.
All right, don't get worked up. That'll be totally good. But there are... So the thing that I think is, as we get underway, is that we've got clear challenges relating to the progress, relating to people that are interested in research in homeopathy. And the first one is that, for the most part, our focus is elsewhere. That I think that because of our nature, because of the reason that most folks land in this corner of healing and healthcare, we're more interested in people. We're more interested in making a difference, finding that those gorgeous remedies that assist people along the way. And because we're a bit more introverted, we're not really then going to go the next step if we're busy, and then convert our results into meaningful papers.
All right, so you've talked about sort of 2 or 3 different things there, and I want to push back on one of them, which is an assumption of who comes to homeopathy to ultimately practice. If people could see your face, you're like incredulous that I'm going to ask a question.
No, you're pushing back.
I'm pushing back.
Yeah.
So better than shoving. So what I'm thinking about is, I think that there are definitely homeopaths who come to the field based on the criteria that you've demonstrated a love for people and so forth. But I also think, there are a lot of people who come to homeopathy. Well, there are 2 other places. One is that they recognize that they've had an experience with this modality that was life-changing, and they recognize that could not have happened in other ways.
Totally.
I think about our teaching clinic and how many times I might say to the students, what other options would this client have had? Where would they have gone? Somebody comes to us who has a physiological complaint and a mental and emotional place that they're stuck and they're suffering, whether it be anxiety, depression, whatever. And we're looking at that whole picture as a composite, right? So there's a way in which people come because they realize, oh, this helped me. There aren't enough people really doing this. I need to figure out how to do it. And sometimes those folks come with really varied skill sets, and sometimes you get what we often refer to as the wounded healer syndrome. Yeah. Right. But
that's my point.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Can I just say one other thing, and then you tell me if it's the same thing as well? The other thing is that lots of people. I'm glad I make you laugh. That's really it's a benefit for me.
Lots of people.
Lots of people come to homeopathy who are in the medical profession.
Yep.
And they are, we see this with a lot of nurses and a lot of the nurses and specialty NPs in our program who have experience in the medical field such that they're not sure they want to apply those same interventions or that same sort of pathway of expectation of treatment protocols in their own family. And so they've got a job that they might love. That's sort of the healer thing, right? Or it's the thing that they have, been accustomed to or whatever, and they know they're making some differences. But there's also this sort of natural curiosity that brings them into a different place. And then you've got this sort of a dual problem of a natural conversion strategy from within the medical profession into what I would call homeopathy like an adjacent medical profession that operates by different standards and rules, is pushing against the tide. But then, sometimes you see people who are not just, busy people who also like helping, but there are busy people who are living 2 lives in doing medicine and doing homeopathy. And then what happens, I think, is there's almost a language barrier in how standard medical and public health research is conducted and the ways in which research into homeopathy is or needs to be conducted. You're staring at me.
Well, I was totally with you up until that last part. And so, I don't really know the difference between the skills and attributes of kind of conventional medical researchers compared to the folks that do research into homeopathy. I don't know if that's what you meant.
Well, you have like a different part of the brain that's been developed, like a different muscle that's been developed, and you've been asking different questions.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the we're not on this first point. We're not disagreeing.
No.
I just think that for clinicians, they just want to fix people, and they don't necessarily want to do the work or go to the next part that is required to create research outputs that can contribute. And I think that, that's the first point that I was going to make.
So, do you think it's because there hasn't been an infrastructure that makes it easy to fold into an existing paradigm? Like anybody who says, "Oh yeah, I'm really also interested in applying my, clinical outcomes or my knowledge base to the body of evidence that exists," because it's like you have to create it, because there are only so many things that exist. I mean, if we look at what the body of evidence that's out there, some of the great research that has been done, I think about people like Jennifer Jacobs, Iris Bell, think about the ways in which homeopaths have been working to sort of the science arm of homeopathy has been, trying to fold itself into the standard RCT model, for example,
yeah, that's
or
true.
thinking about somebody like Alex Tournier with working through the lens of physics and water and sort of the mechanism of action and the properties of the remedies, which I think where we've come at it is from a totally different place, right? Because what it takes to do that is a completely other level of specialty. Whereas I think where I was getting on those earlier points, as convoluted as I may have worked my way into it, it was that what if you're sort of a healer, you're a doctor, you've come to homeopathy maybe without a set of research skills, but you're still really interested in doing something more than just practice. Because let's face it, practice can be exhausting as well,
Totally.
right? So having some other way to be in homeopathy that's slightly different.
Well, the oxygen has been taken out of the room by those folks, and that you mentioned, and that's not casting shade or anything. I don't think I've ever used that word before. Did I use it correctly?
Casting shade.
Casting shade.
I mean,
but that's not to cast shade.
Throw shade.
Throw shade.
If you really want to
all right. Because I'm
you're so cool.
I am hip in New York. Because
make me choke.
Those folks do their work. They go about their work.
Great.
Now, when you look at the body of research that has emerged in homeopathy in the last, say, 10, 20 years, and if you did a quick review, it falls into basic science, mechanism of action, and clinical research, what remedies are good for what, and a little bit of historical research, basically done by one or two people, and a bit of research into the vets and animal outcomes. Those are the kind of categories, not much else.
And a little bit of sort of the predictive research, like part of what Cliff will call, right?
Okay. There's actually two other categories. There's also called, they kind of call it laboratory research, which is a bit of rats and mice. Does Nux vomica in the water once you've injected a mouse full of alcohol? Does it assist in the recovery of the mouse? That's sort of like very, very far away from what we do kind of research. And
what about aggro?
No, and then the point that I want to make is, because it's making me aggro.
Here you go, being cool again.
Is the clinician's been ignored? Well, the practitioner has been ignored in that. There's this book called New Directions in Homeopathy Research, and it was a consequence of some conversations and two conferences back in whenever it was, 15 years ago, and kind of on face value was an interesting process, because all of these different researchers from all the different areas got together to talk about what was going on in their field, in their area, and what was the next strategy going to be.
Right.
And they didn't invite any clinicians, or practitioner researchers, probably because there weren't any. They didn't invite any agro-homeopathy folks, and they didn't invite any cost benefit or economic evaluation of folks or outcomes folks.
Yeah.
And so what it meant is that the new directions in homeopathy research were the same old directions that had already been going on.
Exactly.
And, leaving, this gap, and this is the sort of massive gap, because and what we're proposing, well, it kind of gets the point, and what we're proposing is let's harness the massive unmined amount of data
Totally.
from our clinics, from what actually goes on, and ask questions that are much more orientated towards our clinics.
Yeah.
What we do, how we think. And that's not about this case. It's because it's not more case analyses. No, that's been a massive challenge problem in homeopathy forever, because when clinicians get together and they stand in front of an audience, they say, I had this really good helium case.
Right.
And the person said this, and then that happened, and I gave this remedy, and then the sun came out, and then blah, blah, blah. And it's just like the least impressive kind of evidence, actually.
Evidence, but you have to define, it's the least impressive evidence to the scientific community in terms of how it's considered to be reliable scientific evidence.
Correct. It's full of white noise, full of bias, all of those things. Now, yeah, you're totally right, because traditional, that would be considered to be traditional evidence in a much kind of different context. But
and do you think, sorry, just to stay on that point for another second before you move from it, I think part of that one fish swimming against the rest of them, personality trait that many homeopaths have is, well, we're not going to do what they want us to do. We do something different, and therefore this is kind of our research. And
I don't buy it though.
I know, but I'm just saying that it's also interesting to us. I mean, I love when I go to a conference and I see, one of my colleagues or one of the luminaries in our profession presenting a case where I get to see something in a different way, or I hear a passionate healer and teacher, inspiring me to think about things differently. I mean, I think part of our sort of the drag for us to move forward is that we also kind of like what we have. And
there's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
No, we love it. And in terms of the student experience, learning from cases is such a rich way to do it.
Yeah, totally.
But I don't see anyone being honest about it. What I want to hear, if someone stands up in a conference and says, here's my case, I learned something about this remedy from this experience. I don't want to hear the word cure. I don't want to hear the words, this is evidence, because it's not.
Yeah.
All it is, it is a story to an extent.
And
I just wish that. Sorry, let me, because I want to rant about this.
Go on, rant away.
Because there is so much in the scenario that is the cured case. There is thousands of moving parts that are always unacknowledged by the person that's saying the one thing that worked was
right, and it plays into the Similima mythology.
Oh my God! And it's just, I can't stand it. I've got no hair left,
and now we know why.
I got no fingernails left because they've all been.
And I think, part of what makes me sad about that is that it makes our profession feel unattainable to students, because it sort of pushes the guru mentality, and it puts the analytical process into a different realm where you need to have special powers and be able to see into somebody's soul and have some mapping strategy and some...
No, you're off on it.
Yeah, don't get me started.
So you said something before, and I just want to kind of, if I can, remember it and then tidy it up a little bit. Because you're right, there are some people within our profession that say, we don't want to do what those medical researchers do. We don't want to lose our values.
Right.
I don't think asking for a level of method and rigor is losing values.
You're preaching to the choir.
Right. And so that is, and so I think that there is the third way of doing what we do, honouring what we do, using our Victorian systems, but doing it really well.
Yeah.
And doing it with a level of rigour which has not really been brought to the conversation in a really significant way.
But I think it's because now's the time. And
now's the time.
Now's the time. And if I looked at this retrospectively, I would say, even though there is sort of a culture of kind of the best education that could be provided given the tools and the models that were available. I mean, let's look at how 20 years ago, well, we started our program as being real-time online when, as soon as the technology was available and accessible to the people who wanted to learn homeopathy, right? Mm-hmm. So it wouldn't matter if we had, as tech people, all this great technology. If the people that we wanted to teach didn't have access to it, we were in the same boat. Mm. And so that meant up until, whatever, even as recently as 10 years ago, in order to get good homeopathy education, you needed to be near a good homeopathy school. Mm-hmm. Right? And if you weren't, it meant that you needed to have the funds to be able to travel to get there. And so I think accessibility of education was a bit of a difficulty, right? So now we've got the capacity to train people, right? And to train them well, which means there's room to do more within that paradigm.
It's interesting because, I think there'd be some people that push back against what you just said there.
Yeah.
Because there was Manny's school, Misha's school.
Yeah.
Barbara's school.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in New Zealand there was they used to call it Bay of Plenty College of Homeopathy, but they used a different technology and a different model of teaching that was asynchronous.
Right.
And it was kind of, you could say.
Let's just explain this for a sec. So what I'm talking about real-time online learning, a real thing, and what Alastair is saying is that, well, in actuality, there have been people who did use very well asynchronous, meaning, kind of independent learning.
Yeah.
And we each started there.
Right. And that's important, isn't it?
Yeah.
But kind of to sum this part of it up, there's these challenges that we've got around, cases, around the emphasis on cases, around the emphasis on the focus is elsewhere, that thing that we said at the very beginning. The challenges we've got around, say, funding of research in homeopathy. Also, the challenges we've had about the fact there's so much information, the fire hose of information. What else? What are the other challenges we've had along the way? Yeah, the next one. Oh, that's right. The criticism of homeopathy that we're always singing to ourselves, plus that point we made before about strategy.
Well, what do you mean singing to ourselves? Explain what you mean there.
Well, just the fact that, if I've got something to say that's related to a piece of research that I've conducted, I'm usually publishing it in a friendly journal.
Right.
I'm not publishing, and for whatever reason, I'm not going to publish it in a mainstream medical journal, or in a maybe even in a complementary medicine or an integrative medicine journal. And so that criticism that most homeopathy research is published by homeopathy,
yeah,
or if it's not peer-reviewed, it's published in one of our industry journals, yeah. I think that's pretty legitimate.
Yeah, but now, as I said before, the time is right, because we are reaching this place in the maturity of our profession, which always makes me laugh that we're a 230-year-old emerging profession. But it's like all the ingredients are coming together now in order for things to rise, right? Yeah. So we've got more practitioners because of the accessibility and availability of education, because of the technology that allows for it. And you've got the struggles within the conventional medical model, and people, if we just choose a couple of examples of how people have gotten sicker over time, like you could look at it from so many perspectives. Like if you're a sort of nutrition person, you might say, yeah, we are, however many generations from the advent of processed food, pasteurized dairy, and so forth, right? That gets all the Sally Fallon people, ready to bring their data in, right? The Weston A. Price people have been saying for a long time, like, we've got these changes in the standard American diet have influenced chronic disease. Then you've got, no matter how people feel about the V word and all of the controversy that goes along that, we are now seeing, we've got to reflect on however many generations from the shift in the vaccination schedule from 1986 onward. No matter how you look at it, no matter how you feel about the public health implications of of infectious disease, there's still questions to be asked about, whether or not having second generation of folks who have not experienced the quote unquote childhood diseases, for example, is that having any implication on long-term chronic health, and then you look at the system and the financial implications. We're looking at, having to get different health insurance. And, one of my kids just got to the point where he's 26 and can't be on, the family plan anymore. And I've been doing a deep dive and like, who can afford this? Right? It's ridiculously expensive. It's like, so you've got all the cost factors and all of the infrastructure in the medical world. I mean, what's an MRI machine cost? I don't know, but, that means you got to make up what the cost of having, nuclear technology and the buildings that house it. So if you just take all these factors, you go, whoa, there's an imploding or at least a debilitated system. And like I said before about a lot of the people who come to homeopathy who are in the medical profession, either they've had their own experience with homeopathy or they're seeking other ways to help their clients that are different than let's give another steroid, let's, somebody with an autoimmune disease, let's turn off the immune system so that they don't get an systemic inflammatory response and therefore become symptomatic, right? So like these things, all these factors kind of get dumped in and you go, wow, they're people, real live sick people who are facing real live choices that are not making them feel better and are super expensive, are looking for other avenues. And it, kind of closes that loop back to homeopathy, which, and in the middle of the 19th century was sort of running neck and neck with allopathy as to who was going to be sort of on the forefront of science for the next generation. And like all of that scientific medicine and hospital-based medicine, laboratory medicine, and all of, the insurance model, all of that sort of happened at the same time. And we just sort of went fallow. And I might argue that it wasn't such a bad thing. It was like, okay, so it happened, but is this our time?
Well, this is our time, because with that's massively important what you just said there. That was a true rant.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And it was focused and pointed us to the fact that this is our time, and we do need the PGRN.
We sure do.
Right? And a PGRN is a practitioner generated research network.
And we at Home Foundation and our research office have been really working on how to take the interest that we have from our student population and the larger community of homeopathy and help to focus our efforts on the things that we as practitioners can do. And I think, as I'm looking at how much of a lead up we had here in this podcast, I wonder if we should come back with the next episode to go through sort of very systematically I think it was 9 challenges that we laid out, and then to look at the ways in which we think we can solve it. What are some of the initiatives that are in play, and then we can introduce the PGRN, the concept of a PGRN, but also, the ways in which we are putting this out to the community. How about we have a separate podcast that sort of deconstructs that and puts it into
I don't
play?
think you can just change the rules like that. Just change direction on me like this.
Really?
Well, it's, you just, like, in the middle of the river, we're saying, no, what we're going to do is we're going to come back next week and talk about this. That's what you want to do, isn't it?
Well, because I think what we've done is we've created interest. We've set the scene, haven't we?
We have. Do you want? Should we reiterate those 9 points then?
Sure, why not?
Because we didn't mention that one. We didn't mention the fact that one of the challenges that's often spoken about in homeopathic research is that we're dealing with small sample sizes. And we just didn't mention that one. We talked about our uneven relationship with evidence. We've talked about there's too much information, but we didn't really talk about capacity.
Yep.
which is kind of the 8th one, I think, and numbers. And again, we reckon we might have cracked it. So I think that's a good place to probably leave it. When we talk about capacity as being a challenge, there are some very, very important skills that I think to hone?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, fine-tune.
Yeah.
When conducting research, and I think that's actually sometimes the difference between a good, like an adequate jobbing homeopath that's researching remedies and stuff like that, which, where there'd be a method involved, but a good research methodologist is a capacity that is often missing. We've been missing some capacity. Sometimes the sample sizes are smaller. We clearly have challenges with funding, and the other ones we've spoken about. Yeah.
So when we come back to talk about this, we'll kind of dig into the 8 or 9 points where the challenges are, and we'll look at how Home Foundation, our research office, and sort of the educational model that we've built is really helping the community to do some problem solving, and then we can kind of help people understand how they can get involved. And I think some of what is often considered boring, which is creating systems, it actually creates pathways for inclusion, and it makes, once we've got good systems in place, then people don't have to reinvent a wheel, and that means that we have sort of this unified system that allows a wide variety of people to participate, and all of a sudden capacity is built. So we can talk about the infrastructure that we've focused on. And that infrastructure came about it was like things happen because they happen. When we started HHN, Homeopathy Help Now, the helpline, which then becomes the Homeopathy Help Network as it sort of bled into the chronic care supervision model we already had in place. All of a sudden, we've got this really kind of intricate team of people working really closely together and creating systems so that we can make sure that we're providing good service. But also, everything that we built in our educational model has research as a part of it. It's baked in the cake. Why are you cracking up?
Because I was going to say that. I was going to say, but we baked it in the cake, and then
really,
you said it. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's because you're thinking about cake.
No, it's no, it's not. I'm thinking about cake. It's that I like the way that we built it in from the beginning. Yeah. Whatever, if there's a better expression. But that's good. All right, that's our agenda. Are we going to remember this?
Absolutely.
All right. I'm not. Yes, we are going to remember this.
You can't remember where you put your phone, but we're going to remember this.
If anyone knows where my phone is, could you let me know, please?
Lisa knows. Anyway, all right, people.
That is good.
Let's do it again.
We'll see you next time.
Yeah, we'll be back in a couple days.
Take it easy.
All right.
Ciao. Bye.